Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm honored today to have with us Jim Harshaw Jr. Jim, how are you doing today?
Great, Jamie. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I know you're a busy guy. For the audience out there, for the listener, Jim is an NCAA Division I All-American, or was at one point, athlete, and an internationally recognized TEDx speaker, personal performance coach, and I know we're going to get into a lot more of the specifics of what you're up to today. I know, Jim, you also host the Success Through Failure podcast, which I think is right in line with my podcast. So maybe I shouldn't have even started this one. I should have just thrown you some guests and
No, this is
gone
great. I,
that
I
way.
love what you're doing, man. This is there's a difference, I think, between failure and adversity. Failure is kind of
It's
something
true.
that you do, or you feel you tried and you failed, but in adversity is sort of more external. So I think I
Yeah,
think they can
that's
coexist happily.
absolutely. No, sounds like I love it. We've definitely had guests on who have dealt with adversity that has been a consequence of nothing within their control. I mean, a lot of things, life happens to all of us, right? And then we've had some guests who, had a lot of influence over what actually happened to them as far as the adversity. But
Yeah.
today we're here to chat about your story. For the audience out there, why don't you tell us a little bit more briefly as far as who you are today and what you're up to today?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a personal performance coach, speaker, and podcast host. Live in Charlottesville, Virginia. My background is really wrestling. The genesis of my podcast was my TEDx talk, which is titled "Why I Teach My Children to Fail," and that's largely about my wrestling career, which was mostly failure until I finally got onto the podium at the national championships. And so wrestling background, college coaching background. I was the youngest Division I head wrestling coach in the country at one point. I've owned multiple small businesses, and yeah, now I'm a personal performance coach and a speaker.
Yeah, that's perfect. And we'll get into later as far as, who your ideal avatar is, who you work with specifically client wise. Let's dive right in. I know you've talked about this before, but let's dive into the failure you were talking about. Give us some insight into your background and pick it up where you'd like to.
Sure. So I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, small town kid, small. I was a small kid from a small town, and I thought small. And success was kind of always for other people. Growing up, I always kind of felt that sort of
Mhm.
unconsciously. I can work real hard, like mom and dad. Dad was a construction worker, mom was a secretary, and we were hardworking people, and didn't have a whole lot growing up. Had plenty of love, but didn't have a whole lot growing up, and um, success, financial and otherwise, abundance, that was kind of for other people. We just should be
Mhm.
grateful for what we have and not really strive for more or take much risk. And and that carried over into my wrestling. My goal is to be a
Mhm.
Pennsylvania high school state champion. Never even got onto the podium at the state championships, but I worked hard, and that got me into a great school. Got into University of Virginia as a recruited walk-on. I mean, I had good grades, not UVA good grades. I mean, UVA, it's super hard to get into. Is the number one ranked
Sure.
public university in the country, and
Yeah.
and so I showed up at UVA as kind of feeling like a failure and kind of feeling like I didn't belong.
Mm.
All my teammates were state champions or three-time state place winners. I didn't do any of those.
Hmm.
Academically, I knew that I got in because of wrestling. Really wrestling opened the door for me.
Sure.
Um, and even socially, it's an affluent school, and I grew up, blue collar. And so I
Sure.
just didn't feel like I fit in. And I just remember walking around the university as a freshman, thinking like, we call it first year at UVA for any Wahoos out there listening,
Mhm.
and just walk around thinking like, I can see how all of these guys can find success here, but myself, I don't even know if I belong here, if I'll make the starting lineup, if I can cut it academically here, like how is this going to work for me? And 5 years later, I have a master's degree and an undergraduate degree from the number one ranked public university in the country. I'm a three-time ACC champion. I'm a Division I All-American. I'm invited to live and train at the Olympic Training Center as an Olympic hopeful. I mean, complete transformation happened here.
Wow.
And yeah, and this sets me off into getting into coaching. I ended up, like I said, got into coaching for about a decade, ended up as the youngest Division I head wrestling coach in the country, and starting a family at that point. So I got out of coaching because just the balance thing. And so I opted to
Sure.
get out of coaching. I started my first business, and that was successful. I sold that business and started my next business. I raised some angel capital and started a technology company, built a software. And really the goal of that company was to set my family up for success for the long haul.
Yeah, that's
And
that's 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 awesome. If I can jump in, because
yeah,
there's so much to unpack there. Obviously, there's a lot that happened in college for you, with your mindset and other things. I'm guessing, right?
yeah.
Um, I guess let's back up a little bit even further. How did you come up with the goal of being a state champion before you even, got to college? What was that, just kind
Sure.
of on a whim, or how'd you come up with that goal?
Well, there was only one state champion from my high school ever. And, so I'd always kind of set my goals high, but really in the summer my high school wrestling team wasn't very good. We had a couple of good guys, but really
Sure,
wasn't all that successful of a high school team.
sure.
But in the summertime, I would train in the off season, and I would make the national team, and we would train, for Pennsylvania, and we would travel to the
Hmm.
national championships. And I always had some success there. And the guys who I was training with, that's what they did. They won state championships. They were high
Sure,
up on the podium. And I thought, well, me too. I
sure.
belong there
Absolutely.
as well. And so that's where I got the idea of being a state champion. And then you asked,
Sure.
what about my goal of being an All-American? So
Yeah.
interesting a rabbit hole. We'll go down here for just a second, and then I'll
Yeah.
kind of finish sort of the trajectory of my path there. But so my freshman year, I redshirted, and this, Jamie. I'm not sure for the listener if you know.
Yeah.
In college, you basically have 5 years to do 4 years of competition,
Yep.
and it's changing a little bit these days. But by and large, it's you can redshirt, and then you have 4 years of competition. You can
Yep.
take that redshirt anywhere, and I took that red. I did take a redshirt. Wrestling, it's fairly common to take a redshirt. You
Hmm.
mature physically and kind of adjust to the next level of wrestling,
Sure.
and so I redshirted my freshman year, and had a respectable season and had a winning record in some open tournaments. You can go and compete in these sort of open tournaments. You can't compete under the university name, but I had
Hmm.
a respectable season there. And my red shirt freshman year, so my second
Hmm.
year in college, but my
Sure.
first year competing, I made the starting lineup. And I thought, my goodness,
Awesome.
this is amazing. And I made the starting lineup, and I actually qualified for the national championships, which is the first thing that you have to do to become an All-American. You have to qualify for the national championships and
Got
win
it.
at least 4 matches, and which puts you in the top 8 in the country. Top 8 in wrestling is All-American. And so I qualified for the national championships as a freshman. So now my goal is like get on the podium. And I failed that freshman
Mhm.
year. And then the next year, of course, my goal is to be an All-American again, but we had a new assistant coach come in, and we were talking, getting to know each other a little bit. And he said, "What's your goal?" I said, "To be an All-American." And he looked at me funny. He said, "All-American?" He goes, that like there's the top of the podium is national champion. All-American is anywhere on those 8 steps below national champion. He's like,
Uh-huh.
"Why is your goal not to be a national champion?" And I thought to myself, like, I didn't think I was allowed to dream
To
that
think that
big and to
big.
hope that
Sure.
big,
Sure.
to be the best in America at what I
Yeah.
do. Like, that's that's
Yeah.
that's for other people. That's not for me. That's for other people. And
Yeah.
this guy convinced me that I could be a national champion. And this specific guy, his name's John McGovern. And John, here's a funny story. So I was at the national championships that year. So my third year in college, my second year competing, right? So again, those
Hmm.
4 years, this is my second year as a sophomore competing. I get to the national championships, and there's 15 or I think 17,000 people. It was Dan Gable's last year. So for any
Okay.
listeners who
Sure.
are
I remember
familiar
him.
with sport, Dan
Yeah.
Gable's kind of on the Mount Rushmore of greatest coaches of any sport ever, right? With the Bear
Yeah.
Bryants and the John Woodens. And Dan Gable's last year. This is 1997. It's in Iowa, and this place is packed. And I have to wrestle Dan Gable's like poster child, like the
Right.
guy. His name's Lincoln McElravy. He's a 2-time national champion, 3-time finalist. Now it's his senior year. He's undefeated, ranked #1 in the country. And I'm a nobody from Virginia, a sophomore and not ranked. And my coach, John, gets in my ear and convinces me that I'm going to beat Lincoln McElravy.
It's awesome. So
And I
basically kind
step
of
on.
like a David and Goliath type scene here.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. David and Goliath. And
Got it.
I stepped onto the mat, Jamie, and like, I knew that I was going to beat Lincoln McElravy. Well, 7 minutes later, I walk off the mat with my tail between my legs. I got my butt whooped up and down the mat, and it wasn't even close. And I listen, I know that this is not the happy ending story that the listeners were thinking that they were going to hear, but what happened there was I realized is like after I, sort of, you know, iced down my ego and kind of got over that loss in the locker room, I realized that my only hope, my only chance at beating one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest college wrestlers of all time, my only chance, I had a 1 in 1,000 chance. By believing that I could beat him, I had maybe a 1 in 100 chance.
That's a
10x
really good
my
way.
chances.
Sure. No, that's a really good
that's
way
the
of putting
only
it.
shot I had.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't guarantee success, right? But it increases your odds substantially. That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, there's so much here that I can relate to, and it's definitely not not an episode about me, but I actually went to Johns Hopkins initially to play lacrosse, and
Great lacrosse
similar,
school.
great lacrosse school for sure. And part of it was I couldn't believe I got in, to be honest with you. I was like, how did this happen? But in a lot of ways, I felt very similar to how you described your freshman year, your true freshman year there was. Sounds like you were good, obviously very good at wrestling and obviously a smart guy, but maybe not the best wrestler and maybe not the smartest guy, right? And so it's almost like you would have had an easier road if you'd been, a better athlete and not as good academically, or vice versa. I felt very similar where it's, I made the team and I was exactly like you said, I was lightly recruited, but I was kind of a walk on. I mean, it wasn't really, had to prove it. And ended up transferring, and that's a whole different story. But the bottom line is the path to success is not a straight, up and to the right path. There are a lot of ups and downs, and we like to keep it real on this show. It's not all about rainbows and butterflies and unicorns or whatever. It's man, there are a lot of ups and downs, and I can tell that for the listener who's unfamiliar with wrestling in particular, I'm more of a team sport. I have more of a team sport background. Wrestlers are just a different breed, and mentally, physically, there's just, I don't know, it's there's just no quit. If you're going to be, if you're going to have any level of success with wrestling, you're already just a step above most of the population as far as persistence goes. So anyway, so okay, so your coach convinces you to think bigger. You do think bigger. You increase your odds of beating this Goliath, but it doesn't work out, right? So then what? Pick it up from there. What happens then?
Sure. So I'm in the locker room and I have this realization. Listen, my only shot at beating that dude was to believe. And you know what? It didn't hurt to believe. So that helped me. So I carried that mindset into my next match, and I had to wrestle the number 6 ranked wrestler in the country, and I beat him. I upset him. Because I believe, because I had this mindset, because I realized that, hey, it's okay to believe in yourself. And so this was an epiphany for me. And so I carried that mindset again into the next season, and I go through the next season, my junior year, and again I qualify for the national championships. And again, my goal is to be a national champion, not just an All-American, but a national champion. And again, I fail. And I'm in the locker room. Season's over. I fail. No shot. I'm done. And I'm in the locker room, my face buried in a towel in tears, wondering, why can't I do this? Like, what's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? Am I not smart enough? Am I not capable enough? Like, is it just not in the cards for me? Like, do I just not have it, whatever it is? Do I not have that it factor? And just so much doubt. And I know that, Jamie, you can understand that. And for listeners, you understand that as well. It's like, we've all been there. Every one of us has been there. Maybe you're there right now at some level. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I can't work any harder. I can't run more miles. I can't lift more weights. I can't watch more film. There's not enough hours in the day to do more. Like, there's no such thing as more. I can't do more. So what is it that I have to figure out in order to get there, right? Do I have to, get, lift more, do more squats? Or I got to do more leg exercises? Do I got to learn
Sure.
new techniques? Like, what is it that I have to change with my training to get there? So I dedicated the entire off season, because I got one more year. I got one more year of my life that I've dedicated to this sport since I was 6 years old. I got one more shot at this thing. And so I dedicated my off season to just traveling, and I trained all year long as it was, but I dedicated this particular summer to working as a camp counselor at college camps, right? So, these high school kids come in and are the campers, and then they, the university might bring in an Olympic gold medalist or a national champion coach to be the instructor, and I'm the counselor, right? So I just get to be there, and I'm kind of the helper, but my goal is just to be around these elite performers, these coaches, right?
Sure. Yep. Makes sense.
Pick their brains, learn from them, and ask them questions, and I'm going to solve this freaking problem, like whatever Jim's missing.
Yeah.
I go through the entire summer, the entire off season, and I learn some things. But the next season rolls around, and I'm sitting in a hotel room in Morgantown, West Virginia, and it's the night before the first competition. And I realize I never figured it out. I never figured out that thing. I never figured out the secret, that key that Jim is missing. And in that moment, I gave up on the outcome. I let go of the outcome because I realized all I can do is all I can do. If I put every ounce of my energy and bandwidth and will into this thing, and if I end up on the podium or at the top of the podium, great. If not, I have to be okay with that. Like, if you can't do any more, then you have to just be okay with that. And in that moment, I gave up on the outcome, and I let go of my fear of failure. And I woke up the next morning, and I had the best competition of my life. I had the most fun, and I performed at my best I had ever performed in my life that next day.
That's awesome. That's
was
so cool.
So much fun. It was fun. And I went 5-0. I wrestled, there was a tournament. I went 5-0, lit everybody up. And it was like, wow, like this is great.
This is, you were kind of in the, as athletes call it, in the zone kind of thing, right? Just flowing. And so you enjoyed the process that whole day, it sounds like, and the outcome actually was very good. It turns out, right? So, okay. So you went on a roll, and you won the whole tournament, right?
I win the tournament, and the rest of my season goes pretty much the same way. I had some losses mixed in there, but only to high level wrestlers. And the losses almost stopped mattering. The wins and losses stopped mattering. I remember there was a particular tournament. We were in Las Vegas, and I competed with this guy, and he was beating me 4-1 at the end of the first period. And I'm like, holy mackerel, like this is not good. He had taken me down twice, and he was just dominating me. But again, I held on to the idea of like, it doesn't matter. All you can do, you have 2 more periods. There's 3 periods in wrestling. At the end of the first period, it went terribly. All you can do is like, just keep battling. Like, whether you're up by 3 points or down by 3 or up by 10, down by 10, it's irrelevant. All you can do is just go to war, go to battle with this guy.
I love it.
And that's what I did. And I won the match, and it was fun. It was so fun to just compete so freely like this.
Sure.
So I get to the end of the season, I win another ACC championship, and again, for the 4th time, I qualify for the national championships. And my life is on the line, as far as I was concerned. This was the most important thing. I didn't have a family, and didn't have really the other stuff that we all have in our lives now at this point. But like at this point, this is my life.
This is your identity too. I mean, at this point, I can totally relate with you.
Yeah. So I get to the national championships, and I win 3 matches. Now I've got just one more match. One guy standing between me and the podium on the national championships. Me and a significant goal that I want to achieve in the sport. I never achieved a significant goal like this. And it's the number 4 ranked guy in the country from the University of Minnesota. And they were ranked number 1 team in the country at that point. And there's 15,000 people in the arena. And I step onto the mat, and it's all on the line. And in that moment, I had to continue to give up on the outcome and only focus on everything that I can do. because when you focus on the outcome, you hold back, you hesitate, you second
Hmm.
guess, you self-doubt. I had to just be free, just let 17 years of training show up and
Hmm.
allow it to come
Hmm.
out of me, allow myself to be fully Jim out there on the
Hmm.
mat. And I did
Yeah,
that, and I dominated the match, and I won. I got my hand raised, and I was an All-American. It was a pivotal moment in my life that
sure.
I hang on to today in terms of the let go of the outcome, focus on the process.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, congrats. That's
Thank you.
fantastic. But yeah, I've talked on this show before about it hasn't been framed exactly that way, but just kind of letting go of things you can't control, right? Things that are outside of our control, such as the outcome. I talk about maybe like international, stop watching the news. I'm not saying never pay attention to the news ever, but just letting go of these things that you can't
Sure.
control anyway, such as really the outcome. I mean, you can't control the outcome of a wrestling match or really anything else.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean go to the other extreme where you're packing it in and you don't care if you win, right? I mean, you're
Mhm.
so how do you find that balance there? I mean, because
Yeah.
you still have that goal and you're still trying to win, right? So you do care about the outcome a little bit. So how do you strike that balance mentally?
So Stephen Covey, who wrote
Mhm.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with that book. But one of those habits is starting with the end in mind. You start with
Mhm.
the end in mind. And
Mhm.
certainly in athletics and in business, there's an end. Like we know what that goal is.
Sure.
The challenge is we get so focused on that we
Mhm.
forget the process, and we the fear of failure, the doubt that can creep in causes
Yeah.
us to hesitate and not show up as our best. and
Sure.
and it happens in sales presentations, it happens in job interviews, it happens in wrestling matches and lacrosse games.
Mhm.
It happens if you focus on that outcome versus just fully being present in the moment and bringing every ounce and every fiber of your soul and your being into that moment.
Sure.
Then you can just you can perform at your best. I mean, this is
Yeah.
performance psychology 101. So you're right, it is this like dichotomy of like, okay, I really really want this thing, I really really wanted to get on the podium,
Yeah.
but at the same time I had to do the mind trick, the mental gymnastics to
Yeah.
get myself to let go. And
Sure.
there are different tricks. So for example, one thing that I did was, and this worked for me. Everybody
Mhm.
has to figure out what it is for themselves.
Sure.
I had my in the biggest matches that season, like in the ACC championships and the national championships. I had my assistant coach. I said, you have to have a joke ready for me. Your goal, your job, your one job is to get me to
Yeah.
smile as I step onto the
Nice.
mat. Cut the tension, to get me to
Sure.
smile, to get me to relax so
Right.
that I can just go and perform. And he did that, right? So that
Mm.
works for me.
Sure.
When I'm giving a speech, still these days, I still get nervous. I'm a professional
Sure.
speaker, but I still get butterflies.
Sure.
And the one thing for me is I really focus on the speaker before me instead of
Mm.
focusing, rehearsing that last, 5
Sure.
minutes before my talk, like rehearsing my lines or
Yeah.
reviewing my notes. Like I've done that 100 times by then.
Right.
Let that go and
Sure.
just focus, just be in the moment, focus on the person before you, because you
Yeah.
might pick up a tactic or two. You might pick up something you can refer to in your talk to tie it back to that prior speaker.
Yeah.
Just let
Yeah.
go
I
and
love
be
it.
there.
No, that's really good. And I'm not a professional speaker, but I've heard, another tip is to think about the listener, right? And
Mm,
when you're giving the speech, right? But ultimately it's the same concept as you're not thinking about yourself. You're not so focused on yourself and that you're caught up in your own fears and what if this goes wrong or how am I going to do this? You've put in the reps, you've put in the time, of course. No one's suggesting you've shirked any of that, responsibility and hard work to get there. But once you're there, let it go, right? And focus on the listener, the person in the audience, or focus on the speaker before you. I love that tip. That's really good.
yeah, you're right.
Um,
I mean, I love the idea of focus on the listener, and I think you do this because like your podcast is amazing. I do this before I hit record. Is like and even before this interview here,
yeah,
I pause for just a moment and say, it's not about Jim. This is not about the stories I
sure.
tell, or this is about the listener. When
Right.
when we take the focus off of ourselves and put it onto others, that's when the best version of us shows up. I just got back from a retreat. I hosted my retreat just over the past weekend with my clients, my inner circle coaching clients.
Yeah.
And it was on limitless, like living. How do
Mm,
we get to living our limitless lives?
sure.
And one of the biggest takeaways there was taking the focus off of us and putting it onto others. How can we serve others? How can we help others? What does the work that we're doing, how does this lift others up? And when we take that focus off of ourselves and put it external, then that's another way to just
Absolutely.
put down the reins.
No, I just finished a book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks. It's a
Hmm.
fantastic read, and have you read it?
That was brought up at the retreat,
Oh, really?
interestingly.
Is that
For
right?
me to hear that twice in the last 72 hours, I'm writing that one
You
down because one of
you
the
gotta
guys at
read
the
it.
retreat brought that up.
Yeah. But that's really what the book is about. It's the subtitle is I think it's a quest for a moral life. Honestly, I didn't fully know what I was getting into when I started reading it. But it's really about, okay, your first half of your life, and this is, of course, not everyone's life works this way. There are exceptions to every rule, but we're born very kind of self-centered, self-focused, and we all have that inclination always, right? It's still always there, where we care about our own self. But really true life is in purpose and abundance are all found in when we give it away and we focus on others. And that's, his book does a fantastic job of kind of detailing that in many different contexts, whether it's marriage, neighborhoods, business, nonprofit, just all kinds of ways of giving back. But really, the lesson in there is it really does come back to you. So, like you said, in wrestling, you ended up actually having better outcomes because you weren't so focused on the outcome, like and being the best version of yourself, as you already said, because you weren't so focused on being the best version of yourself. In a sense,
Mm-hmm.
you were just focused on being present and enjoying the journey and working as hard as, showing up the way you knew you could.
Yeah.
So I love it. So walk us through kind of, from college up through today. I know that's more than a
Yeah.
year or two, but and
Sure.
I know there's
Yeah.
some lessons in there, and I know you have a lot of small business experience, so maybe touch on that.
Sure.
But yeah, walk us through kind of the ups and downs as far as your own journey from college until today.
Yeah. So after college, I don't usually tell this part of the story, but I did take a year where I just traveled. I had a couple of job offers, Naval Academy, University of Pennsylvania, and as assistant coach, coming right out of college. And I looked at training, going full time to train at the Olympic Training Center, and decided, I'm taking a break. I'm stepping away from the sport. And gosh, I just went on an amazing year of adventure. I backpacked through
Nice.
Central America for about 3 months and had all kinds of crazy experiences going through
It's the time
Mexico
to
and
do it, right?
Honduras and Guatemala. Oh, it was amazing. A bunch of scuba diving and some amazing hikes and all kinds of crazy adventures. Then I went to Europe for a month, and then I came home, and then I got a job leading adventure camping tours, traveling all across the country, which is where I met my wife. She was a fellow tour leader. So
Cool.
did that for a year before I got called back to be the assistant coach at the University of Virginia. That's when I started my coaching career. Coached
Got it.
as the assistant coach at the University of Virginia, and then I was the head coach at Slippery Rock University, which is a smaller school, Division I wrestling program, but Division II athletics. But wrestling opted up to Division I, being in
Okay.
Pennsylvania. Wrestling is so deep in Pennsylvania; it's just culturally
Sure.
embedded in PA, and so I coached at Slippery Rock, and then several years into that, I thought to myself, like, this is life consuming. This is all consuming. And we wanted to
Yeah.
start a family and had an opportunity to move back to Charlottesville. So we did, we took that. So we moved back to Charlottesville, started our family, started my next business, or started my first business, which I had a painting business when I was in college in the summers.
Sure.
But after that, I started like a home services company in Charlottesville. We
Okay.
had about 10 employees and 3 crews on the road, and they were doing window cleaning and power washing and gutter cleaning and Christmas lighting and that sort of thing. And did that for a few years, started that from scratch, grew that, and sold it.
Okay.
Because
So just, sorry to cut you off. So
Sure.
at this point, just to be clear, you're coaching as well, or this
So
business was your.
Yeah. So when I came back to Charlottesville, it was through a
Yeah.
privately funded position from a large donor
Okay.
who brought me back because he wanted, we wanted to be back in Charlottesville at some
Hmm.
point, and he wanted to fund this position sort of independently funded outside of the university
Okay.
through. In wrestling, there's a term called regional Olympic training center. So we had there were these regional Olympic training centers, and I headed
Okay.
up the one that was sort of attached to
Okay.
the University of
Got it.
Virginia wrestling program. Yep. So I was
Okay.
coaching, sort of somewhat of an assistant coaching role at Virginia, but I was heading up this regional Olympic training center. And then I started the business on the side, and that kind of grew to the point where I had to go full time into that.
Sure.
And then sold that.
Yeah, no, just the reason I dug in there a little was because so many listeners, so many people, and the listener maybe in this position as well, wrestle, no pun intended. I didn't even think of that. Until they wrestle with the concept of, you know, starting a side hustle, or I hate my job, I should quit now and then start a business, or and of course everyone's path is different, and you can see where this is going. But what are your thoughts on that? As far as personally, I was able to work part-time for 7 years with benefits, and while I grew my real estate investing businesses and then mortgage note investing businesses, and
Yeah.
so it was a little bit more of a deliberate, long, drawn out process there. And then eventually last March, I was able to quit my W-2. What's your advice to somebody out there who's kind of, thinking about starting a side hustle or just quitting their W-2 and jumping into starting a small business?
Yeah. I actually have a podcast episode that I recorded on this. If you look up Success Through Failure podcast, quit your job, or you'll find
Yep.
it if you Google that. And my take is this: like you said, it depends on where you're at in life. And
Sure.
I at that point in my career, had a young family. We were able to take a little bit more of a risk then, and so I really encourage you to think about building something on the side. What the nice thing about building, like you've done, like I've done, building a business while you have a full-time job, is you have the benefits, you have lower stress. And here's the thing that most people don't talk about: it forces you to find the leverage points.
Mm.
You don't have 40, 50, 60 hours a week to put into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
You might have 10 or 20 if you can squeeze out 20 at
Sure.
most.
Yeah.
And so you really have to focus on the high leverage action items, the things that are going to really move the needle. And it forces you to maybe outsource some things overseas, or create systems. You can hire somebody else part-time, or get an intern from a university and have them do some of these other sort of smaller tasks, these things that kind of bog you down, this minutia you get bogged down into. So I encourage people to really think about how can I do this? Not can I do this, but how can I do this while I still have a full-time job? And that's what I did even with this business. And we'll talk about that here shortly as well.
I love it. That's really good. You got to be more efficient with your time because you don't have as much free time to devote to this, right? So you do end up being really focusing on those kind of high level tasks, or maybe not high level, but high outcome, or high,
high leverage,
tasks that actually high leverage. Exactly. And I did find your podcast episode is called My Last Day: How and Why I Quit My Job When There Was a Lot on the Line. Success Through
What
Failure.
episode does that say? Does it say the number there or no?
Doesn't say the number right here, but we'll link to it in the show notes. But so so talk to us about, okay, so you did the home services business, which I love, by the way, because today more and more it's like everyone thinks they got to have this unbelievably good idea and get venture capital and kind of take a grand slam swing at things. And I think more and more today it's these blue collar kind of tried and true businesses that are having a lot of success. A lot of the trades people are making very good money. So if you can show up and do what you say you're going to do, I think your odds of success are pretty high. So curious, why did you choose that type of business?
So I had a mentor at the time who was a multimillionaire and owned several businesses. And I was talking to him, over coffee one day, and we were just talking about business, and I've always had an entrepreneurial streak in me.
Sure.
And he said, I'm going to start a window cleaning business unless you do. If you don't do it, I'm going to start one. And he said, look around. He said, every building you pass, every home you pass has
Mhm.
windows. There's a
Sure.
market there, and I did my research and talked to a few folks, and a great way to do research on something like this is call a window cleaning company in neighboring towns, or towns, a whole way across the country if you want, and say,
Sure.
tell me about this business. They're not competitors. And they
Sure.
people love to share. People love to share what they know, and people love to tell you how good they are, or whatever
Yeah.
information. So I did that, and that's how that started.
Mhm.
But you're right. And were there other window cleaning businesses? Of course, there were several of them in town. And did I think that we could be the best? Absolutely, we were. We were the best,
Mm.
and everybody got trained, and they had uniforms, and we were very systematic about how we did everything, from how we answer the phone to how we talk to the customers to how we clean a window and the order that we go, and put shoe covers on your shoes, and we just did well. We were professional, and
Mhm.
like you mentioned, Jamie,
Yeah.
just show up. Like, show up
Right.
when you're going to show up. How
Yeah.
many contractors, and for the listeners, how many times have you experienced with a contractor
Yeah.
that they don't show up when they say they are, things take longer, they don't communicate well, all of that. And I just thought, that's not how I operate anyway. So I think I
Sure.
can operate this better than
Yeah.
anybody. And we did, and we had great reviews and great customer base.
Awesome. So you did that for a few years, sold the business. Um, and then what's your, walk us through the other businesses you've had.
Yeah. So the next business, I had this idea, and I kind of started this while I had the other kind, the window cleaning power washing company. I loved the sport of wrestling, and I knew that there was that if we could market the sport, we would if we could make it easier for fans to be fans, we could grow the sport, and as well as not just wrestling, but a lot of the Olympic sports, like the
Mm.
lacrosses and the soccers of the world, the sort of quote
Mhm.
non-revenue sports they call them in college.
Sure.
And so I created a tool. I raised some angel capital. We built a software that really connected all of the social media platforms, which were very fledgling at the time. This is around 2009, 2010,
Mhm.
where you could send from the app that we created, you could type up a post, and about your hey, we just beat the crosstown rival, and here are the results, and don't forget next week's alumni night, and by the way, here's the link to our fundraising page. You could type that all up, you could dictate it into your phone, hit send, and it would post instantly as a blog post on your website, as a news update on your website
Nice.
within a minute.
Mhm.
And then it would automatically post onto Twitter and Facebook, and what else was around back then? There was no TikTok back
MySpace.
then.
I don't know.
MySpace. Yeah, might have been MySpace or something. But you could post. It would post instantly out to those, as well as send out a text message alert for those who are subscribed to the text message alert for your team.
Nice.
And there was sort of a scale with that. So I connected with USA Wrestling, which is the international governing body, or the national governing body for wrestling for the
Mhm.
Olympics, and they were on board, and they were promoting it, and we could pull their content and feed it down into these, Twitter feeds and whatnot of
Mhm.
local programs. It's really, I thought
Mm.
it was pretty fascinating. I'm still fascinated with the
Sure.
idea, because nobody's quite doing it this way. But we built it. I did, this is my first time building a software. I had no clue. Didn't raise enough money. I was just tripping over my feet the entire way. Didn't have the right people to sort of guide me and help me understand, like, how do you even build a software? And I didn't do the
Sure.
building. We had an offshore
Mhm.
overseas development team, but I didn't know how to coach them through it. I didn't know what a wireframe was, all of this. So I made so many mistakes along the way, but I got my MBA in how to build a technology company, for sure.
Nice.
And about 2 years into this thing, everything, we had revenue, we had customers, but not enough revenue, not enough customers,
Mhm.
and we were out of money, and we had debt up to our eyeballs. I wasn't spending enough time with my wife. I wasn't spending enough time with my kids. I wasn't
Mhm.
working out anymore. I was a mess. I mean,
Mm.
I had a failed business, and a failing marriage,
Mm.
and just, I was broken at that point.
Mm. Okay.
And,
Just-
and I got to a point where I had to shut it down.
mm. So was it just to push on that a little bit? Was it,
Yeah.
you know, was that option presented to you, or how did you know for sure you had to shut it down?
Oh man, I had pushed and pushed and pushed for as long as I could to make the money that we had last. We basically ran out of money, and
Hmm.
it was just too stressful. We had
Sure.
3 kids at the time, and it was or maybe we had 2 kids at the time,
Hmm.
and man, it was just
Yeah.
the time had come.
Yeah. Understood. No, it's I'm a co-owner of a loan servicing company. It's BiFi Loan Servicing, and it's it was a startup. We didn't buy the company off the shelf. It's not only do you have to really understand loan servicing, but you've got to understand a lot more than just that. So, the whole startup part of it, which comes with all kinds of stressors, and it's had its ups and downs, I'll be honest. And it's something that I don't think entrepreneurs talk about enough. If you're trying to start a business from scratch, especially something like a software company that you've never done before, which, by the way, this was 2009. I mean, what you talked about now doesn't sound, it sounds like, it's fairly easy, or a lot of
Sure.
companies are doing something similar, but
Right. Absolutely.
14 years ago, that's
Right.
cutting
This
edge.
was
I mean,
cutting
yeah,
edge revolution. And I think we were also a little bit ahead of the schedule, a little bit ahead of time in terms of, people weren't quite ready for
the
that
the
yet.
demand
Didn't
wasn't quite
understand
there.
it. Demand
Sure.
wasn't there. Yeah. Right.
Got
Right.
it. Okay. So you put so much time and money into and effort into this business, um, but ultimately it doesn't work. So what did your family life look like at that point when you scrapped the business? What did you do from there?
So I remember, I literally can picture one night getting in an argument with my wife about the business and finances, and the stress and level in the house was just so high.
Hmm.
And she went to bed, and I flipped open my computer sitting on the couch, and I got onto Craigslist, because that's, I guess, where I used to go to look for
Hmm.
jobs.
Hmm.
And I just started scrolling on the jobs page,
Hmm.
and I'm looking, there's like jobs for like paper boys and unpaid internships. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my goodness, like, how did I get
Is this
here?
where I am? Right,
Is
right.
this
Sure.
really where I am?
Sure.
Like, all American wrestler, 2 degrees from the #1 public university in the country,
Yeah.
youngest Division 1 head coach in the country. I had a successful business already. Like,
Sure.
is this really where I ended up? Is
Right.
here at the bottom again? And I was just dejected. And I closed my laptop, and I set it aside, and I walked upstairs, and I laid down next to my wife. She's already asleep in bed. And I'm just laying there, just ruminating on this, thinking to myself, like, what was in place in my life when I was performing at my best?
Mm,
When
that's
I
a really good.
went from underperformer to peak performer, like,
Hmm.
what was there? Because right now, they talk, people talk about all these great life lessons you learn in sports. And I'm like, man, either I didn't learn them, or I need to figure out
I
what they
forgot
were.
them.
I
Sure.
forgot them, and I said, what was in place? What were the things that were in place then that allowed me to perform through failure, to deal with failure, to be resilient, to create success that was beyond what I thought was even possible for myself.
Hmm.
And I realized it was like a camera lens, Jamie. It was like a camera lens coming into focus, where it was very clear to me, there were 4 things that were in place.
Okay.
And this came from a deep place inside of me. And so I'll go through those 4 things real quick.
Yeah.
So
Let's do
number
it.
one was, and you've experienced this as a college athlete, you've experienced
Mm.
this. Number one, success was very clear to you. Like, the vision for what success looked like, it
Hmm.
was crystal clear. I mean, you knew
Sure.
exactly what it looked like. For me, it was
Yeah.
standing on the top of the podium at the national championships. I knew what that
Sure.
looked like. I could imagine what that would feel like. Um, and I had a general idea of what I had to do to get from here to there.
Hmm.
And so I had this vision, and it was based upon my values. Like, I probably couldn't have stated my core values like I can today, but back then I wanted to be tough. I wanted to be disciplined. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to go on to
Hmm.
success after wrestling, like so many of my heroes and my mentors did.
Sure.
And so that was the first step. I was like, I have to get clear on what success looks like, but inside of me, like, what do I even value? Like, how do I move forward in my life if I don't understand, like, truly deep down what I'm rooted in. And listen,
Sure.
all of us can sort of throw out a couple of nice words and say, yeah, these are the things I value. But I
Sure.
hadn't really done the deep, hard, introspective work that I needed to do. So that was the first step.
Yep.
And the second step is this. When I was competing, I had goals that were aligned with the values. Those goals when I was wrestling were tethered to my values. I didn't know it then, but looking back in hindsight, I could see this. Most people these days set goals based upon what they see on social media, or what they see, the mass media tells them that they should want, or based on what you
Sure.
see parked in your neighbor's driveway. But when you create aligned goals, you become resilient, you become strong, you become clear, you become confident, you become consistent.
Hmm.
And those
Really
were
good.
all the things that I was missing. And um and I had those when I was competing, right? And when you have these aligned goals, these goals that are directly tied to, you can see the tie between your goals and your values.
Yep.
It changes the hard work. I always tell people it changes the hard work to inspired action. It's not hard work, it's inspired action. And I'll give you an example. My junior year, and I'm going to tell you this example, and I'm going to preface it, put an asterisk by this by saying, don't try this at home. This is not something I recommend. But I stepped onto the scale one day. It was 2.5 days before a competition, and the scale read 172 pounds. The only problem was my weight class was 150 pounds. I was 22
Whoa.
pounds over 2.5 days before weigh-ins. And over the course of the next 2.5 days, I destroyed myself. I wrung every last bit of water that I could get out of my body. I wrung it
Mm-hmm.
out. And I stepped on the scale 2 days later, 2.5 days later, and I made weight.
Wow.
And I was a skeleton. I was a shell of myself. Probably should have been hospitalized, but I did it. And it was a horrible, horrible experience. And again, don't try this at home. To
Right.
be honest, in wrestling, you can't even do this anymore because there's too many
Sure.
rules in place, and there's
Right.
hydration tests and all this.
Which is a good
But
thing now.
it's an amazing thing. It's an
Yeah.
amazing thing. But that was it hard work to do that? Yeah, but it was really inspired action. Like I couldn't do
Mm.
that today. I've I'm still I still work out. I'm pretty lean, but like
Sure.
I got more to lose today than I did back then,
Yeah.
and I couldn't lose 22 pounds just because
Sure.
it wouldn't be inspired action for me, right? There's a difference. So anyway, when you have
Sure.
aligned
That makes
goals,
sense.
you can do these hard things and keep moving forward despite any pain and suffering, because you have a vision. These are your values. This is what you want. And so that's the second part, right? And the third piece is this. And you, again, Jamie, you've experienced all this. Like the third piece is I had an environment of excellence.
That's
And the
so
environment of
key.
excellence, yeah, is so key. You were surrounded by people who have been there, who have done this. And you have coaches who kick you in the rear end if you need a kick, or help you course correct if that's what you need.
Yeah.
That they help you see your blind spots. They've done it before. They've been there before. You have teammates, like-minded teammates that you're surrounded by. You're accountable to them. They're accountable to you. There's
Yeah.
just
Well,
this
you talked about
environment.
your assistant coach, your sophomore
Yeah,
year, who
that's
he
it.
saw your blind spot, which was you weren't thinking big enough. You didn't believe in
That's right.
yourself enough. So
Yes.
just so that's critical. I mean, our environment is huge. So that's number three. And then sorry to push us
Yeah.
on a little bit, but
Yep.
and
Sure.
then what's the
Fourth,
fourth
fourth
piece?
and finally is this: is you have to have a plan to follow through. Like,
Love it.
if I lost a wrestling match on a Friday night, I'm sitting in the corner feeling sorry for myself. Coach comes walking over. Hey, Jim, I'll see you tomorrow morning in the weight room, 8 a.m. Be there. Like it or not, you're going to keep marching forward. And in
Absolutely.
the real world, we don't have that a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
You know, kids get sick, or the car breaks down, or a global pandemic happens, God forbid, or the economy
Mhm.
goes in the tank. Like, you have to have a plan, a systematic framework in place to keep you marching forward, even on, or especially on, the days and the times when you don't feel like it, or you lose clarity, or you're doubting yourself. All of that, you have to have a plan to follow through. So those are the 4 steps.
Love it. That's really good. That's a very good framework. So I do have some rapid fire questions here, Jim, if you're ready
Yeah,
for them.
I'm ready.
Awesome. What's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
They think that I'm a highly polished UVA grad when really my roots are, man, I love to get dirty. I love to mountain bike and hike and climb and do hard things and split wood. I'm a blue
Love
collar
it.
guy at heart.
Got it. Awesome. Um, if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
Believe. Stop doubting yourself. Doubt the doubters, not yourself.
Love that. So good. If you were given $10 million tomorrow, what would you do with it, Jim?
I would do a lot of work for my parents and family. I would set my kids up for success in terms of college and sort of pay off any like that kind of stuff all in advance. And then I would get philanthropic and really give back to the place. That's really what drives me is the philanthropy. I mean, there's a few there. I'm part of an organization called F3 Nation, and I'm the chair of the advisory council. So giving back would be very close to my heart, to my church and otherwise.
Fantastic. In your business today, what's one challenge that you're facing? There's always a challenge.
Yeah. The challenge is showing enough people that this framework that I just shared with you is transformative. I have clients who are with me for life. They're lifers because we teach them, coach, and help them stay on the path with this framework. And it's getting this out into the world.
Awesome. So speaking of that, who do you work with? I mean, what's your kind of ideal client or avatar? Who do you work
Sure.
for? Work with?
Yeah, I mean the ideal client is to be honest, probably in the 35 to 55-year-old range.
Sure.
Mostly men, but we have women who are in our program as well. A lot of folks who have they're athletic minded, right? Whether they were a high school or college athlete, or they're a weekend warrior now and they do Spartan races or marathons or whatever. Those types of folks who are really focused, goal oriented, know there's another level inside of them, know that they're leaving too much on the table. A lot of them are business owners and entrepreneurs because those are folks who it's about performance. It's about personal performance. To eat what you kill. That's our ideal audience.
Awesome. So you work with a lot of business people, entrepreneurs, but it's more of a kind of personal growth and kind of encouraging them and helping them, coaching them to be the best version of themselves.
That's right.
Is that fair? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. How about a book or two that you could recommend for my listener?
I always go back to one of the first books that I read getting into business was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie. It was written in, I think, the 1930s, maybe, or early 1940 or something like that.
Somewhere in that time frame.
If you go to Barnes and Noble, you'll find 5 copies on the shelves today, and there's a reason. It's because it's such a transformative book, and that business or that transformed my business as well as my personal life. So that's a great, absolute no brainer. Another great one is Built to Last. This is written by the same guy who wrote Good to Great, and
Jim Collins.
Jim Collins. Great book about what it really takes for a great company for a good company to be great, but it's about the vision they have and the values. Really, a lot of that coaching framework that I share with you is proven through that book.
Love it. Fantastic, Jim. Jim Harshaw, where can our listeners find you online? And tell us a little bit more before we wrap up. Tell us exactly what you're up to today with your business.
Sure. You can find me, jimharshawjr.com. You can sign up for a free one-time coaching call right on that website. You can go there, jimharshawjr.com/apply if you want to find that page directly and grab a time on my calendar and we can talk. And then, go to any social media platform. You'll find me. Just look for Jim Harshaw, search for Jim Harshaw or the Success Through Failure podcast. Published over 400 episodes with Navy SEALs, New York Times bestselling authors, Tim Ferriss, Ken Blanchard, Olympic gold medalist Shannon Miller, on and on, just world-class performers. But that's a passion there as well. So some great episodes. Again, and you can get all the action plans to every single episode if you go to jimharshawjr.com/action. You can just get a PDF of every single episode, all the action plans.
Awesome. How did you get Tim Ferriss on your show?
Grinding it out, hard work, finding everybody. I truly believe in this world, everybody has their unfair advantage. And
Sure.
my unfair advantage with Tim Ferriss was he wrestled in high school. I also, obviously my
Hmm.
wrestling background. So
Yeah,
I put out a tweet and said, "Hey, Tim, if I can get 100 people to retweet this, will you come on the show?" And I got 100 people to retweet it. He never responded. Eventually he did. And he came on.
that's awesome. Well, you're thinking big, right?
Yeah.
Um, we're about to wrap up here, but can you think of a quick case study based on kind of one of your clients that you can highlight for the listener?
Sure. What I do is I help people get really clear on what success looks like for them, kind of what that next thing is for them. A lot of my clients are generally successful. So I have a neurosurgeon who I work with, Dr. Mark McLaughlin. He's a nationally renowned neurosurgeon. He's actually a speaker as well. But he had wanted to write a book, and he really needed somebody to push him, help him get clarity on the process, and walk him, just help him get clear on not just the goals, but something we set as micro goals. These are monthly goals. So it's
Hmm.
these measurable KPIs and metrics that we track. We track you a whole
Hmm.
way along the way. And Mark has written an amazing book and really built a brand around that book. In addition to his neurosurgery practice, he's now a
Nice.
well-known author as well. So just one of
Fantastic.
the examples of, somebody who's already performing at a higher level, but knows there's more in the tank, knows there's another gear inside of them.
Absolutely. I love it. No, I put you on the spot there. So nicely
Great.
done, Jim.
Love it.
Jim Harshaw Jr., thank you so much for spending your this hour with us. I really appreciate it. And thanks again.
Thank you, Jamie, for all you're doing. I love your podcast and love what you're putting out into the world. Keep it up.
Thanks. And to the listener out there, we appreciate you spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.